Joining me now are Gerry Anderson, Executive Chairman of DTE Energy, Portia Roberson, CEO of Focus Hope, and Angela Reyes, Executive Director of Detroit Hispanic Development Corporation. Welcome.
Well, thanks.
Thank you all for being here. We know in Detroit there are a lot of jobs, and there are a lot of people who need jobs. In between those two groups are a lot of barriers, and we're going to talk on this panel about what those barriers look like and how we tear them down. And Gerry, probably no group faces more barriers to re-entering the workforce or joining the workforce than returning citizens, released inmates. And this tree trimming program, we just talked about one effort to find a place for these folks, because we know if folks are working, returning citizens are working, if they know they've got a chance at a job before they get out of prison, it focuses them more, and it improves sort of the conditions in the prison, motivates them. But for employers, there's a bit of a risk here, or at least there's a perceived risk. Why is DTE Energy taking that risk?
So I had the same perceived risk that everybody does when you deal with returning citizens. But look, this is a chance to pair up a business need with a really critical social problem. And I began to hear from CEOs, generally of small companies, that I'm hiring returning citizens and they're some of my best employees. And then I ran into the leadership of Johns Hopkins Hospital, big institution in Baltimore, who's been hiring thousands of returning citizens over decades. And I invited them to DTE to lay it out for us, and they said the same thing. These will be among your best employees because they're looking for a second lease on life. And so we decided to sort of prove the case for ourselves, and over the last few years have hired in about 50 returning citizens, got a 90% retention rate. And so we decided it was time to up our game. And as we were thinking that, the Department of Corrections and we crossed, and we decided to put the first training facility by a business within the walls of prison, the Parnell Correctional Facility or the Jackson Prison. So we'll have classes of about 25 going through. They'll be in class for 4 or 5 months. And when they come out, they will join the union and head into the journeyman program to become first a line clearance tree trimmer and hopefully then a lineman.
Portia, you all at Focus Hope are in the worker training business. Right. Should this kind of training start, or could it start well before the release date? Could they come out of prison ready to work if we had more forward-looking policies?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. I mean, I think there are opportunities that you can develop in prison so that when people come out, they know exactly what they're going to do next, and they know that they are going to have a job after they complete the program. And I know it cuts down on recidivism. So what we want to see is people who don't return to prison because they have a way of making a legal living wage, right? Yeah. And so this is an opportunity to do that. And I think there are ways in which, in partnership with the Department of Corrections, you can start to develop those programs inside of the prison walls.
You know, one of the brutal realities that I've learned of is that in Michigan, we have about 8,000 or 9,000 people leaving our prisons each year to reintegrate. Yeah. 60% of them end up unemployed. And of the 60%, a third end up with a return ticket back to prison. But if you're part of the 40%, recidivism rate is 2%. We have got to get people job opportunities.
So, Gerry, as an employer looking at this, are there policies the state could put in place to make it easier for you to hire returning citizens? I'm thinking about liability protections and other measures.
I give the state and the Department of Corrections a lot of credit. They've started these vocational villages within the prisons. I think what we're doing as a company is really an experiment with them to try to figure out how to make it work, how to let us come right in there and train them up for work that we vitally need. So we'll all learn together, but then we need to scale it up. These vocational villages today are training about 600 returning citizens, people about to be paroled. We need to take it up to match the 9,000 that are leaving our facilities.
Ms. Reyes, these 9,000 folks are coming back to neighborhoods, coming back to communities. In terms of the impact on communities, it makes a huge difference if these folks have something to do when they arrive back home.
Absolutely. I don't think there's anything more important than a job in stabilizing people coming home from prison, because without that, they really don't have much of a future or hope. And it's really easy. People slide back very quickly into the old lifestyle because they have to survive. They have to eat. They have many times families that they have to support. They come back with a lot of bills, sometimes child support that they have to pay, tickets that have to be paid. And if they don't have a legal way of paying those things off and earning a living, they will end up right back where they were before.
So we started talking about the barriers between jobs and workers. And again, we know there are plenty of jobs, plenty of people who want them. But when you look at Detroit and the ravages of poverty, the impact poverty has had on this community, it's not as simple as saying, well, we got a worker, we got a job, let's plug them in. A lot of people have not worked ever. Maybe they're from families who it's been generations since people have worked. That ability to go out and actually participate in the job hunting process is perhaps more limited than it is in other communities. How do you knock that barrier down, Portia?
Well, I think we see the same host of barriers that we've talked about before. Transportation, childcare, those kind of issues. And so what we've decided at Focus Hope is, one, we want to be an employer-led workforce organization, which means that we come to somebody like Gerry and we say, how many people do you need? Before we start the training program, before we develop the curriculum, we work in concert with that employer. So first of all, we know when somebody comes to the door that they're going to have a job if they commit to coming to Focus Hope and commit to the class schedule, right? But then we know that we have to do our wraparound services. So in addition to some of those obvious things, clothing closets and bus tickets and childcare that fortunately at Focus Hope we're able to provide through some of our other opportunities and programs that we do. We also look at financial literacy. We also look at how do we teach somebody that cashing your check at the party store is not the way that you want to, start your career, that you want to figure out how to have a bank account and what's going to actually be in that bank account or on that check when you actually get that check, right? Because so many people, as you said, have not had that experience. And so I think that's one of the barriers that we have to deal with. The other thing is really letting people know what opportunities are there. I think for the last 10 or so years, we've talked only about being successful if you go to college. And that is not the truth. I mean, that simply is not the truth. And we've got to expose people to the opportunities that are there if you're not going to be a person who goes to college. We'd certainly like for everyone to go if that's their choice, if they can afford it. But certainly there are ways in which you can make a good middle class living if you don't. And we want to expose them early enough on. And I guess the barrier that we get rid of there is the exposure piece, that sometimes the barrier is just that they don't know what the opportunity is there.
Right. And Mr. Reyes, you must see that in your community, people haven't worked in a long time, or perhaps have never worked, not really understanding what it takes to go out, fill out an application, go through an interview. That must be terrifying.
Yeah, especially people who have been inside for a very long time. Think of the technology that has changed in the past 10, 15 years. So you have people who come out who don't know how to use a cell phone. We've had one individual who told us he sat in front of his TV at home by himself all day because he didn't know how to use the remote control, because the remote control is very high tech nowadays. So just knowing how to use technology, how to use a cell phone, how to use a computer, those are all very strange things to people who have been not exposed to those things for many, many years. And then there's other issues like family reunification, because their kids have grown up in the meantime. Previous partners have moved on. So learning how to deal with all of those different changes, how do you reintegrate into your family even, is a big deal for a lot of folks.
So I want to talk now about pot. Michigan legalized recreational marijuana a year ago, starting to be implemented. It will be fully so in just a short time. You look at Colorado, the struggles the employers are having, trying to find workers who can pass a drug test. Gerry, you're an employer. At some point, our employer is going to have to say, we're just going to ignore marijuana use, that it's going to become part of the fabric of our community and what we have to expect as employers.
That might be a tough one for us. We have people who run nuclear power plants. We have people who are up near high voltage lines on a daily basis or around powerful rotating equipment. You've got to have your wits about you, or you're literally putting your life at risk. So I think there are going to be occupations where letting go of drug testing is going to be really hard to do. Now, there may be other occupations where they do, where those safety issues are less critical, but we've certainly got jobs where that won't be the case.
But Portia, these drug tests have become almost routine for any job you go out for. Are they obsolete now in a society that has embraced marijuana use?
I don't think they're obsolete by any stretch of the imagination. I think what Gerry said is absolutely true. It's going to depend on the job that you're applying for. It's not going to be across the board anymore. And I think we're going to at some point see it treated like alcohol. If we see people coming on the job and they look like they're under the effects of alcohol, they're drunk on the job, then we immediately pull them from that job and send them home or do whatever we have to do to get them some help with that. And we're going to have to sort of start to learn about the effects of marijuana and what we should be looking for. But I definitely think that the drug testing is always going to be in place for some of those jobs where you are not only a threat to yourself, but a threat to others if you're operating that kind of machinery under the influence of marijuana.
Ms. Reyes, you see people who don't want to go through that job application process because they're worried about marijuana testing and drug testing.
Unfortunately, a lot of people, if you ask them if they use drugs, will tell you no. And then you say, do you smoke marijuana? And they'll say yes.
Yeah.
Because they don't consider it to be a drug because it's in such wide use. But I agree with Portia is that it's because marijuana stays in your system much longer than like alcohol, you can test positive even if you're not under the influence at the time. So I think we're going to have to figure out some different ways of figuring out if somebody is using or not or under the influence.
I talked earlier in the day with Nicole Sherrod-Freeman of the Detroit Workforce Development Office, and she was on the earlier panel, and she talked about the opportunities that are coming out of FCA and all those workers who aren't going to get a job, perhaps as many as 50,000 applicants for 5,000 jobs, and the effort underway to put them into a talent pool to sort of catalog them, understand their skills, and what they need to do to get ready for the next time they apply. How important is that going to be for employers who are coming in here looking for workers?
Well, I think for us at Focus Hope, we did the same, or similar type of thing with Flexingate. When Flexingate opened, we brought in a lot of people. We trained them for production worker jobs and labor jobs at Flexingate, and then the numbers, they had what they needed. And so we still had a number of people on our list that had applied and wanted to work at Flexingate. What we've tried to do now is we've reached out to them and said, listen, that didn't work out for you, but we've got truck driving programs, we've got machinist programs, we've got IT programs. Are you interested in any of those? Let's have you come back in. Let's test you for that. And a lot of times what you'll find is people just want a job, they want to work. So they're not so wed to where they were going to work as much as they are wed to the idea that they're going to get a good paying job.
Gerry, having that pool that you can draw from is going to make a big difference, isn't it?
It certainly helps. We're making progress, but we've got a ways yet to go in Detroit in workforce engagement. But I'll tell you, one of the things I think will help is the Detroit Regional Partnership, the new economic development organization, has explicitly put out a goal that they call either deep prosperity or inclusive development, which means we're going to target pulling in companies that bring jobs at all levels of the job level.
We're going to have to leave it right there. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.